My entitled sister kissed my boyfriend a week before her wedding. I told her fiancé, thought he let it go, but he stunned everyone at the ceremony. The week leading up to my sister, Veronica's, wedding was a non-stop flurry of activity. It felt like someone had cranked the volume up on life, and I was stuck in the middle of a chaotic symphony. Dress fittings were endless, each one a battleground where Veronica's vision clashed with the reality of what looked good on an actual human body. The bridal shower was an exercise in excess, a mountain of pastel-colored gifts and sugary treats that seemed to stretch on forever. And the rehearsal dinner? Forget about it. It was a black-tie affair that felt more like a state banquet than a casual gathering of family and friends. Honestly, I was starting to feel more like a personal assistant than a maid of honor. Veronica, always the center of attention, had morphed into a full-blown bridezilla, her demands escalating with each passing day. It was, this shade of pink, not that one, and the flowers have to be exactly this arrangement, and someone needs to find me a tiara that sparkles just so. I swear, if I heard the phrase, "It's my wedding," one more time, I was going to scream. But hey, she was my sister, and beneath the layers of tulle and bossiness, I loved her. Even if she could be a bit much. Then came the incident. The moment that turned the whole pre-wedding chaos into a full-blown family drama. It was a Wednesday evening, just a week before the big day. I was at Veronica and her fiancé, William's, apartment, helping, or rather, being ordered around, with some last-minute decorations. William, a successful lawyer with a calm demeanor that bordered on saintly, was out at a work dinner. How he put up with Veronica's antics, I'll never know. Maybe that was his secret, escaping to work dinners. I was wrestling with a particularly stubborn string of fairy lights, trying to drape them artfully around the balcony railing, when I heard a noise. It was a soft, muffled sound, like a whispered conversation. Thinking it was Veronica, I called out, "Need a hand with those centerpieces?" But it wasn't Veronica. Instead, I saw my sister locked in a passionate kiss with another man. And not just any man. It was my boyfriend, Daniel. My heart did a weird flip-flop thing, a mix of shock and disbelief. It felt like time froze for a second, the world tilting on its axis. My stomach lurched. The fairy lights slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor in a shower of tiny, sparkling bulbs. The noise startled them both. They jumped apart, their faces a mixture of shock and guilt. Veronica's eyes were wide with panic, her carefully crafted composure crumbling like a sandcastle in a storm. Daniel, on the other hand, just looked lost. Like a deer caught in headlights, frozen and helpless. "Emily. It's not what it looks like," Veronica exclaimed, her voice high-pitched and panicked. It was her go-to defense, the classic denial in the face of obvious guilt. "Oh really?" I retorted, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because it looks a lot like my sister is making out with my boyfriend a week before her wedding." I couldn't help the bitterness that laced my words. The hurt was raw, a gaping wound in my chest. Daniel stammered, trying to find an excuse, some explanation, but nothing came out. He just stood there, looking like a guilty puppy, his eyes darting between me and Veronica. I felt a surge of anger, hot and consuming. It was like a fire had been lit inside me, burning away all reason and logic. How could they? How could Veronica, who had everything, the perfect fiancé, the dream wedding, the adoring family, steal the one thing that truly made me happy? And Daniel, how could he betray me like this? How could he look me in the eye and tell me he loved me, all the while sneaking around with my sister? I didn't say anything else. I couldn't. The words were caught in my throat, choked by a mix of anger and hurt. I just turned and fled the apartment, tears blurring my vision. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed to get away from them, from the betrayal, from the lies. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached, the city lights a blur of color around me. I ended up at our parents' house, collapsing on the couch in a sobbing heap. Mom, bless her heart, was always the calm in our family storm. She made me a cup of tea, the chamomile scent doing little to soothe my racing heart, and listened patiently as I poured out the whole sordid story. I told her about the stolen kiss, the look on their faces, the wave of hurt that had crashed over me. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice filled with sympathy. She reached out and took my hand, her touch warm and comforting. "What are you going to do?" That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? The question echoed in my mind, a heavy weight on my heart. Part of me, the impulsive, emotional part, wanted to confront Veronica right then and there. I wanted to scream and shout and let out all the anger and hurt that was bubbling inside me, threatening to spill over. I imagined marching into her perfectly decorated apartment, tearing down the fairy lights, and telling her exactly what I thought of her and her perfect life. But another part of me, the more rational part, knew that wouldn't solve anything. It would just create more drama, more chaos, more fuel for the already raging fire. It wouldn't undo what had happened, wouldn't erase the image of them kissing, wouldn't heal the hurt in my heart. And then there was William. Did I tell him? Did I ruin Veronica's perfect wedding? The thought hung in the air, a heavy, unspoken question. He seemed so happy, so in love with Veronica. He was a good man, kind and decent, and he didn't deserve to be hurt. But did he deserve to be lied to? Did he deserve to start his marriage with a foundation built on deceit? I wrestled with the decision for days, the pros and cons swirling in my mind like a tangled mess of yarn. Veronica, predictably, avoided me like the plague, her calls going straight to voicemail. She knew what she had done, and she didn't want to face the consequences. Daniel, on the other hand, bombarded me with apologies, texts, and calls, begging me to forgive him, claiming it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. He swore it would never happen again, that he loved me, that he couldn't live without me. But how could I forgive him? How could I forget the image of them together, the betrayal etched into my memory like a brand? How could I trust him again, knowing he was capable of such deceit? The thought of him touching me, kissing me, now felt tainted, poisoned by the memory of him with Veronica. Finally, just 2 days before the wedding, I made up my mind. It was a difficult decision, one that cost me many sleepless nights and tearful moments. But I knew what I had to do. I had to tell William. It wasn't about revenge or ruining Veronica's big day. It was about honesty, about him deserving to know the truth about the woman he was about to marry. It was about giving him the chance to make his own decision, to choose whether or not he wanted to spend his life with someone who was capable of such betrayal. I called him, my voice trembling as I explained what I had seen. I told him about the kiss, about the way they looked at each other, about the hurt and confusion that had consumed me. He listened quietly, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a stony silence. I could hear his breath catching in his throat, the unspoken emotion swirling in the silence between us. When I finished, he simply said, "Thank you, Emily. I appreciate you telling me." Then he hung up. I didn't hear from him again before the wedding. The silence was deafening, a heavy blanket of uncertainty that smothered all my hopes and fears. I wasn't even sure if he'd be there, if he'd call the whole thing off. Part of me, the part that still believed in fairy tales, hoped he would. I hoped he would see Veronica for the selfish, deceitful person she was, and that he would run far, far away. But another part of me, the part that still loved my sister despite everything, dreaded the thought of her heartbreak. I knew she had made a mistake, a huge one, but she was still my sister, and the thought of her being hurt, of her dreams being shattered, made my heart ache. The wedding day arrived, a beautiful sunny Saturday. The kind of day that was made for weddings, for love, for happily ever afters. But beneath the surface of sunshine and celebration, a dark cloud of uncertainty hung over everything. I put on my bridesmaid dress, a pale pink monstrosity that Veronica had insisted on, and plastered a fake smile on my face. It felt like wearing a costume, pretending to be happy when inside I was a mess of conflicting emotions. The church was packed, the guests buzzing with anticipation. They were all dressed in their finery, eager to witness the union of two seemingly perfect people. Veronica, looking stunning in her designer gown, was a vision of bridal perfection. But where was William? The question hung heavy in the air, a silent drumbeat against the backdrop of wedding music. It was a question that echoed in the hearts of everyone present, a question that was written on every face in the church. Where was William? As the music swelled, the delicate strains of the bridal march filling the vast space, the bridesmaids began their slow procession down the aisle. They moved with practiced grace, their pastel dresses a sea of gentle color, each step measured and precise. But as they glided past the pews, their smiles fixed and slightly strained, all eyes were drawn to the empty space at the altar. Still no William. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of anxiety and anticipation. It was a chaotic symphony of emotions, each one vying for dominance. Had he changed his mind? Had he decided to go through with the wedding, pretending everything was fine, burying the truth beneath a veneer of normalcy? The thought trailed off, unfinished, too painful to contemplate. I glanced at Veronica. Her smile, which had been so bright and confident just moments ago, was starting to falter. The carefully crafted facade of bridal bliss was beginning to crack, revealing the anxiety that lurked beneath. She shifted nervously, her weight shifting from one foot to the other, her eyes darting towards the back of the church, searching for William. A tiny frown creased her forehead, and her carefully applied makeup couldn't quite hide the flicker of panic in her eyes. The bridesmaids reached the altar, their pastel dresses a sea of gentle color surrounding the empty space where the groom should have been. Still no William. The music softened, a delicate melody that seemed to mock the tension in the air. It was a cruel irony, the sweet, romantic music playing against the backdrop of growing unease. Veronica's smile was now completely gone, replaced by a look of undisguised anxiety. Her carefully manicured hands gripped the bouquet tighter, the delicate flowers crushed against her trembling fingers, her knuckles turning white. Whispers rippled through the congregation, like a gentle breeze rustling through leaves. They started softly, tentative at first, but grew louder, more insistent, a chorus of speculation and gossip. Where is he? Has he left her at the altar? Oh, this is so awkward. The whispers swirled around us, each one a tiny pinprick of discomfort. I stood there, frozen in place, my own emotions a tangled mess. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me, the part that was still reeling from the betrayal, hoped he wouldn't show up, that Veronica would be left standing there, humiliated and alone, her carefully constructed world of perfection shattered. But another part of me, the part that still cared about my sister despite everything, dreaded the thought of her heartbreak. I knew she had made a mistake, a huge one, but she was still my sister, and the thought of her dreams being crushed, of her being the subject of whispered gossip for years to come, made my heart ache. Just as the priest, a kindly old man with a gentle smile, began the ceremony, his voice soft and soothing, attempting to fill the void left by William's absence, the doors of the church swung open. The sound echoed through the silent church, a dramatic interruption that made everyone jump. A collective gasp swept through the congregation, a wave of surprise and anticipation. All eyes turned to see William striding down the aisle. He moved with a newfound confidence, his shoulders squared, his gaze fixed straight ahead. He was no longer the calm, almost passive man I had known. There was a new strength in his stride, a sense of purpose that radiated from him. He was a man on a mission. He reached the altar, his footsteps echoing through the silent church, each one a deliberate punctuation mark in the unfolding drama. He took Veronica's hand, his touch surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the anger that I knew must be simmering beneath the surface. He turned to face the guests, his expression unreadable, a mask of composure that gave nothing away. The whispers died down, replaced by a hushed anticipation. Everyone knew something was about to happen. Before we begin, William announced, his voice clear and strong, cutting through the silence, there's something I need to say. Veronica's face paled, her carefully applied makeup suddenly looking garish against her ashen skin. Her eyes, wide with fear, searched William's face, trying to decipher his intentions. What was he doing? What was he going to say? The questions hung in the air, thick with tension, each one a silent plea for answers. William took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping over the stunned guests, taking in the sea of expectant faces. I want to thank my beautiful bride-to-be for giving me the most memorable week of my life. He paused, a hint of irony creeping into his voice, a subtle shift in tone that sent a shiver down my spine. A week filled with surprises, with revelations, with a newfound understanding of the woman I thought I knew. He turned back to Veronica, his voice now laced with icy sarcasm. You see, Veronica, I believe in honesty, in transparency. And thanks to your sister, Emily, he nodded in my direction, his eyes meeting mine for a brief moment, I've learned a great deal about your commitment to those values. Veronica's face crumpled. Tears welled up in her eyes, threatening to spill down her cheeks. She opened her mouth to speak, to protest, to deny, but no words came out. She just stood there, her body trembling, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before everyone's eyes. William continued, his voice rising with each word, gaining strength and conviction. You thought you could deceive me, Veronica. You thought you could play your games and get away with it. But you were wrong. I know about your little tryst with Daniel. I know about your lies, your manipulations, your utter disregard for anyone but yourself. He let go of her hand, his touch now repulsed, his expression one of disgust. I won't be a part of your charade any longer, Veronica. I won't marry a woman who is incapable of honesty, of loyalty, of love. He turned to face the priest, his voice firm and unwavering. This wedding is off. Then, without another word, without a backward glance, he turned and walked out of the church, leaving Veronica standing at the altar, a sobbing, humiliated mess. The guests, stunned into silence, watched him go, their faces a mixture of shock, confusion, and morbid curiosity. Then, the whispers started again, but this time they were different. They were louder, more animated, a whirlwind of speculation and judgment. Oh my God! I can't believe it. What a scandal! I watched Veronica, my heart filled with a mixture of pity and satisfaction. She had finally gotten what she deserved. Her carefully constructed world of perfection had crumbled around her, and it was all her own doing. She had tried to manipulate everyone, to control the narrative, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. As for me, I left the church with my head held high. I may have lost a boyfriend, but I had gained something far more valuable, my self-respect. And in the end, that was all that mattered. I had done the right thing, even though it was hard, and I could finally look myself in the mirror without shame or regret. The weight that had been pressing down on me for days, the weight of the secret, the betrayal, the anger, had finally lifted. I felt lighter, freer, like I could finally breathe again. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew I could face it with honesty and integrity. And that was enough.